Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of Clifton's Clicks, your Cliff Notes to the Cosmos. And as always, I am your host, Clifton Smith, and I greet you with love and respect, appreciation, gratitude, and some inspiration today. So it's been a bit of time, about a month since the last talk, and so I'm excited to see where this goes. For those of you who are focused on getting straight to the point, this may not be the episode for you. This is a running synthesis of a lot of things that have happened in over a month of incredible and continued growth, including incredible clicks for me. So, where I want to start is most likely where I left off, which was exploring the cosmos and all these different dimensions and realities and what comes from when you study those different dimensions and realities is what's been around to talk about these things, which is typically in either sci-fi movies or books or in certain religions or more esoteric or even cultish like organizations. And one of the challenges is the negative stereotype or stigma associated with a cult or a group of individuals who have a specific belief and a specific lifestyle that may or may not resonate with your lifestyle or the general collective's understanding, and it may have some harmful aspects to it as well. And one of the areas that came through answering some incredibly insightful, thoughtful questions over the holidays was, how do different religions compare with one another, especially as they at a certain frequency of consciousness and understanding, as they all are attempting to explain the same things, and that is your connection to God, your connection to Source, understanding who you are, and answering some of those unanswered questions within you. What are you here for? What is life about? Why do people have pain? Why do people die? What happens after? What is reality? All those types of existential questions. And a lot of individuals who have retained certain levels of consciousness, myself included, I'm going on that process, have come to certain realizations and understandings and attempt to do what every normal person does or a general person does, and it's relaying their understanding of reality to one another. For some people, their reality may be exactly what's on Fox News or exactly what's on CNN or even MTV, or now we got TikTok, right? So their reality is what they consume, what they think about, and what they perceive, and more importantly, what they believe, not just about the world, but actually about themselves, because what they believe about themselves, they actually manifest in the external world. So if you are feeling that the world is going to end, part of you inside feels like you're going to end, or part of you desires that you end in a very cunning way. So as you view the world, as you go about the world, recognize that how you perceive it and where you find yourself is a reflection of your inner space. And this is a very profound lesson for me and understanding for me, because there's so many levels of meaning and just cognizing what that truly is. And so there's so many levels of societal programming that has infiltrated our thought process. But looking back and breaking through what that programming is and where it comes from, it comes from people's experiences of core wounds and issues, as well as lessons. The question and challenge becomes: are those lessons being transformed into the highest expression of the lesson, or are they simply a continuing manifestation of that traumatic experience that was incurred by an individual? And so that may be a bit of a mouthful, but it's essentially, a simple example is, why do we have crosswalks? It's like, Well, perhaps there were streets and someone got run over by a car because there was not a marked walkway there. Well, you can desire to include crosswalks by championing the pain and suffering that an individual went through, or you can transmute that into a more positive frequency and promoting and advocating for just how incredibly abundant we will feel knowing that we can cross, in full safety, knowing that our children will be safe to go outside, um, and knowing that it's going to be allowing drivers to be more at ease, parents to be more at ease, rather than painting this picture of, well, if there's not a crosswalk, you might hit someone or you might get run over. Both are true, and they're different faces of expressing the same outcome, the same future. That being a desire for a crosswalk. And while those vibrations of the more lower perspective of being scared or fear or hurt are very much a part of humanity, what's important is to do the internal processing of those feelings so as to not go about amplifying them in your life as well as projecting them on to other people for them to go deal with. And that's why this process of perpetual completion that Bhagavan Sri Nityananda Paramashiva talks about is so vital. And it's the idea that everywhere we go, our vibration and our frequencies get affected, and that's a great thing. That's the dance of life, as he says, Nataraja's Ananda Tandava, the great dance. You don't stop the dance because a bracelet has fallen off. You just keep going, and when you obtain a state of bliss, the dance is now to enjoy getting into a blissful state in all energies, in all areas. And sometimes that requires being very well nurtured and incubated in a way to hold that resonance. Because a beautiful comparison, because one of the things that I've been talking about is vibrational awareness and breaking down things into a vibrational frequency perspective, is the idea of two tuning forks. And this was shared with me by an incredible person named Freddie, who has a website, Freddie Set Go, and a podcast, which I highly recommend checking out if you're interested. But he talks about two tuning forks, and I'm sure he saw this from other places and other people, but that's where I found it. So perhaps he can direct you to where he heard it from. But if you have two tuning forks of the same note, like an A here and an A here, you can strike both of them and they'll both vibrate together. Or what you can do is you can strike one, and then that one's vibration starts to vibrate another, right? But then if you start moving the second tuning fork further away from the first fork, the vibrations won't have as much of an impact in terms of moving the second tuning fork. If it's closer, striking one tuning fork will help affect a second one. But the further you separate it, the less the second one is going to be affected. Unless or until you keep striking the first tuning fork. Then you can start to keep that second tuning fork going. And one of the most powerful ways is to start with them together. And I really need to have tuning forks for this to be a very clear explanation, but hopefully you can visualize with me. Is you strike the first tuning fork very close to the second, and then you start to move the second away as you continuously strike the first, and it'll keep the resonance and the tuning fork going, as opposed to starting it far apart and trying to constantly strike the first one. And this principle is a very powerful principle in terms of the retreat model and the inner awakening programs and such, that a lot of the conversation and reconciliation I've had with the approach of creating an ashram or a closed ecosystem, and having such a profound change, and then going back to your old frequency, how that creates complications and sort of almost high highs and low lows, um, really puts into perspective for me and appreciation the lifestyle applications of Kriya's yoga puja when you leave a inner awakening or a intense program. That is, when you are exposed to a certain frequency. And in reality, that's a lot of what these programs do, is they help clear your inner space, replace your inner space with powerful cognitions, and align your body to be able to receive high vibration, and more importantly, to hold that vibration within you. Just like that tuning fork. If you're holding onto a tuning fork and you try to strike it, and you hold onto the prongs, it's not going to reverberate. But if you let go and you start to strike it, it'll start to sound. Well, our incompletions are very much like us holding onto the fork part of itself rather than the base part. You can strike it all you want, but it's not going to reverberate. So you have to, layer by layer, remove all those incompletions. That way, when you strike it, it actually makes the sound. And that's a beautiful part of the completion process and the inner work. And then the next part is like yoga. You need to make sure that the fork itself, when it's struck properly, will vibrate at the appropriate rate. If you have an A tuning fork and it's bent, that's not gonna create an A sound. So you have to straighten it out, and then you can start to strike it and create that frequency. Or you can strike another frequency. Say the monks or the guru can be at that A frequency, sounding it out, and your tuning fork is now ready to receive that frequency, and it starts to pick up the frequency of the already tuned, completed, and powerfully resonating monk or guru, whatever you want to call it, individual. So that way, when you touch it, or when you come close, you can start to vibrate at the same frequency as the first person. And so you start to do that more and more. So that way, when you move further away from the guru or the ashram or the program, you can hold on to that frequency. But there will have to be those continuous strikes from that first tuning fork for you to continue to vibrate at that frequency. It won't take much, but you need to have that continuous energy being applied to that first tuning fork for your second one to work. And once again, if you want to send me 2 tuning forks of the same type, I'll be more than happy to explain this in a much clearer visual way. But I don't have tuning forks with me. But that continuous striking of that first tuning fork to get your tuning fork to keep going once you've done the completion work, once you've started to have powerful cognitions and you've started to really been exposed to that powerful energy. The continuous strike is really what you would call the lifestyle practices that include watching, the satsang, doing the yoga, kriyas, and puja. And, taking that from, that one perspective to a work perspective, right? Because that's, grounding it into good old US of A and our free market economy, or at least that's the intention of it, is, let's see how we can do this. So when you go to college, so I'm a CPA, I'm an accountant, I have an accounting degree, and I'm an MBA, so, but specifically a trade like accounting, I go to college and I learn accounting rules and principles and start to understand it. Generally speaking, I've sort of have the structure in place to receive the frequency of what it's like to be an accountant. And you could say this for like any degree you have, like marketing or finance or liberal arts. You're starting to understand what it's like to become that which you desire, a marketing manager or a financial analyst. And you do practices inside a closed environment with clear right and wrong answers, so that way you can start to improve your understanding and starting to get your tuning fork tuned to go out into the real world or to the business world. But even though you have an accounting degree or you're a financial analyst, you have a finance degree, doesn't mean you are an accountant, right? You have to go out and you have to practice. And even Swamiji says, if you're going to be a doctor, you got to go to a hospital to be a doctor. If you're a business person, you've got to be, in business, conducting business, transacting. If you're a lawyer, you've got to be in court and you got to be, dealing with law. And so, all of this to say that you can get prepared and you can start to feel what it's like to be an accountant, a doctor, a lawyer in school. You can start to get tuned and aligned to what it's like and what's necessary for you to be a doctor, an accountant, something of that nature. But until you actually start practicing it, you actually don't know what it's like to be that which you were going to school for. So you need a continuous strike from that very first tuning fork as you move away from the school or from the schooling to maintain that resonance of what it's like to be an accountant or a financial analyst. So you have to actually practice what it is you were being trained for. Otherwise, the focus and the frequency of your tuning fork starts to die down. It doesn't mean that it goes away at all. It just simply means that it starts to die down, and you need more reminders to resonate at that kind of frequency. And so one of the challenges in a lot of the traditional universities is they do a lot of good in terms of aligning your tuning fork and giving you some practice areas to start feeling what that frequency is like to be an accountant, a finance person, marketing person. And they even start having internships. So that way you start to really feel what it's like to be exposed to that environment. But at a certain point, the initial striking tuning fork, that being of the college degree or the program, you graduate and you're no longer using that university or that program to be that initiating energy of striking that tuning fork for you to resonate off of. And so that's why a transition needs to be had in a more powerful way for you to transition from a university experience to a internship experience to a full-time career experience. And many sophisticated corporations have done this very well. That being, they start to recruit individuals as early as their sophomore year to start to get them exposed to handling and understanding what the frequency is of their company. So that way by junior year, they have their summer internship, and then when they graduate, or even before they graduate, they know that they are headed to that company. And so it's a natural, gradual transition. And while this is beautiful in a corporation setting, and for those who pursue a big company, corporate path with internship opportunities that have been fully established, there are those who are still searching and still wondering what it is that their frequency is going to be and what company it is that they wish to align with, let alone what it is they wish to do. And so by having a commitment at such an early stage, one may prematurely choose a frequency that they feel they want to resonate with and go through that whole process. But in the end, realize that that's not the frequency that they want. There might be some aspects that initially attracted them to that frequency, but they want to step away from that frequency because they realize it's not what resonates with them anymore. And so this is taken into a real life example of, okay, well, maybe you um, took a job and you want to move to another job. How do you do that? It's very challenging for people to make a career jump, um, especially if it's a completely different type of career. It might be easier to go from one job in one industry to the similar job in a different company. Um, but for those who want to move away from that, or even those who wish to be an entrepreneur and be their own boss, that becomes a really challenging aspect because they're vibrating so strongly at a specific frequency that getting exposure to what it's like to be an entrepreneur, regardless of whatever your profession is or whatever it is you wish to create, is such a different frequency, even though it might be a similar job or role that you provide. Because when you enter into a corporation or a company that's already been established, there's all these rules, all these frequency signatures that you just pick up, that of simple HR policies, of work policies, of where you're going to work. Even so much as they have places now where you get your own laptops, you have food provided. When it comes time for taxes, they have your taxes ready to go. So all those things are surrounding the frequency of the company, that when you step out to go on to your own path, you have to learn and understand. And it's really vital to understand those at the beginning, rather than when an emergency comes and say it's time for taxes, and you're sitting there going, what is all this? Or when you're ready to hire your first person and you have no idea how to do it. All of those are really pivotal pieces of education for entrepreneurs, especially those who may not be out there to join a giant incubator or an accelerator or bring in tons of money that brings in specialists. So for the individual practitioners, or people who are growing with more bootstrapped or growing based off of cash flow, having that education and understanding is super, super key. And one of the reasons why it is so valuable to go into an accelerator, because they tell you, oh, this is what you have to do for HR, this is what you have to do for accounting, this is what you have to do for payroll, this is what you have to do for hiring people, and these are the contracts. And so the frequency of a startup or starting your own company is drastically different than the frequency of being an employee at a company, even though you may be doing the same exact things in terms of the value you provide to your customers. That being perhaps you're a practitioner working for a company versus starting your own practice, or you are an accountant who's part of a big corporation and now you're starting your own accounting practice. Or marketing, you're marketing something for a company, and now you have to market yourself. So what's encouraged is to find and be around the resonance of people and of energies that are doing the same thing that you are wanting to do, and that's the value of a co-working space, and a successful co-working space, not one that is full of incompletions and is failing or struggling, but of co-working spaces that are succeeding, because the successful entrepreneur has a specific resonance about him or her, and just simply being in that space is similar to being in the breathing space of an enlightened master. If you go in a spiritual approach, you can observe and you can pick up what it's like, the thought process, how the person operates, and just the frequency that he or she resonates with, for you to pick up. Because regardless of whether you guys are in completely different industries or different services or different products, there is a frequency of what it is to be a successful entrepreneur. And so it's important to be around other entrepreneurs who are succeeding, so that way you continuously get that first striking tuning fork experience, that you can feel that successful resonance. And so the same thing can be said for any profession that you wish to go out and be on your own. And one of the reasons why what they might call the guru disciple or the master apprentice relationship is really valuable, because you start to pick up a lot of intangible understandings of what it's like to be a lawyer or an accountant or an enlightened master that isn't necessarily explicitly verbally spoken about, and that which you can't receive from simply reading a book, that has been mass produced and printed. And so I want to leave you with that note of the two tuning forks and the resonance, and to tie it back to the original part about how different religions enter into explanations of various realms and dimensions, and answer certain questions. Just I encourage you all to think about what frequency you wish to resonate at when you go about your day-to-day life, and use that to hone in on which collection of thought you wish to be around. Because we all wake up in the morning, we all create, we all go to sleep, and we all eat. What resonance do you wish to be a part of while you do that? And there's a core resonance of any religion and any person who creates a religion, and and same thing of any company. The person who founds the company has a specific resonance, and so that is the frequency you're really feeding your soul with, especially on the spiritual side. And so, what frequency do you wish to have? And so, in the business setting, what frequency? What is the founder's frequency that you wish to be a part of? And same thing with where you get your news. What kind of frequency do you wish to emit? And I'm not advocating for turning a blind eye. I am advocating for specifically consciously choosing content that relays the facts in a specific frequency that you wish to further experience and manifest. So that being of a consistently negative frequency, or perhaps a positive frequency. And I will close on the illusion of being unbiased in reporting and information. From a factual perspective, there can be this perceived unbiased perspective of we are just reporting the facts, but the order in which you report the facts, the timing in which you report the facts, the emotions with which you report the facts, and more importantly, the energy with which the intention of reporting the facts is the key determinant factor as to what resonates within your inner space. And one of the key reasons I encourage you to think very consciously about where you receive your facts. And if you have any question about the frequency of the place where you receive your facts from, simply look at other people who are drawn to receive information from that same news vehicle, and that will reveal the type of person and the type of frequency that you have within your inner space, or more powerfully, what you are attracting and drawing to your inner space. So with that, I appreciate your time and attention, and wish you a wonderful rest of your day, and see you next time on Clifton's Clicks, your Cliff Notes to the Cosmos. All right, bye.